gonna be Valentine's Day Eve, Monday, February 13th. Tomorrow's National Awkward Day. We begin narrative speeches tomorrow, which we'll talk about. Honor Society results are coming up on Thursday. If you get in, there is a meeting during Best on Thursday where we talk about the Super Happy Fun Night next Friday. On the speechy things, I'm going to put out the request again to have you actually read it at some point so you know what you're doing. My goal is to give you an A unless you don't follow the directions, so hopefully directions become your friend at some point. And then please fill out this top part. It is a third of your grade. Goes along with that whole directions thing to there. Whatever you write here, that's what you get to use during speech. So that'll become your note card during your speech. Because I don't want you to write out the whole speech. I just want you to write out that little bit. And so I'm against writing out speeches ahead of time because I think it makes for a bad speech. I don't want you to sit there and just read from note cards. I want you to have an idea of what you're going to say, but being able to stand up and speak is a little bit better. You'll be standing yonder, looking this direction. The timer will be up there behind you as you are going through and doing it. We will take volunteers. If we run out of volunteers, then we go to our Honor Society kids who get to be leaders because it's the joy of being responsible. And then once we're through all of those kids, we get to go through the remaining kids. And that'll take us till Thursday. And then Thursday, end of class period, we'll be heading over to the library. Friday, you won't be here because Friday we have e-learning day. And I will post e-learning Thursday after school for those of you who want to get a head start on it. And it will be a little thing we have to write like a paragraph response. It's the same thing every 7th grader is doing. Questions about any of that? Then let's get to entertaining stories about people making poor choices. And it's not about 7th graders. What?
That's impossible.
Oh, I know. There's other people making poor choices than not just you guys. On Blue Sheet, we're going to finally start filling stuff in on Blue Sheet, starting in this little top section there. By the way, you have put name on this, right? Your first and last name?
Yes.
Responsible people? Because you can't, well, I mean you can, but this does not get turned in until like end of March, which is a long time to go without losing it as we fill it in. And if you lose it, you have to start all over again, which may make you sad. So what we're going to do is this little section here. I have 10 words that connect to Greek mythology. I'm going to have you guys have patience with me hiccuping. There we go. Try to figure out what god the word comes from. Some words will be easy to figure out definitions, like I'm pretty sure you know what March is or June. But other ones like jovial, you might have to work a little bit harder. But the trick is, can you figure out what word it comes from? If you look on White Sheet, the one that has not the family tree, but the other side, that's where a lot of this will end up coming from. Especially if you look at Roman names, that'll end up helping you figure out where a lot of them come from. Some of them are on there, some of them are around the room. What I'm doing now is try to babbling for a moment to give some of the smart kids a chance to figure out a few of them. So we're going to get to our first one, which is going to be jovial. Let's see if you can figure out what god jovial comes from. And the god would be Zeus. So why do you say Zeus? His Roman name was Jove. So Zeus, Greek named, Roman named Jove. Zeus is probably one of the better known gods from Greek mythology, and here's where I get to start pointing things out. Over here, this is Zeus, who looks like he's part merman, but he's not. And he's holding on to his little lightning bolt. Behind Swanky, he's the dude over here in purple, also holding on to little lightning bolts. Over here, he is going to be sort of between Smithers and Sterner, again, holding on to his little lightning bolts. He was the king of all the gods, the father of many of the gods, awkwardly sometimes called the King Daddy or Daddy King, which may be a little on the awkward side, depending on the conversations you get into. If you look at your family tree and you see Zeus on there, you're going to see Zeus pops up quite a bit. Yes. And realize this is not all of Zeus's kids. These are just Zeus's kids that went on to be famous. Zeus was sort of like an NBA star. He had a lot of kids, but not all of them went on to play basketball too. He literally had hundreds of children. And if you think, how did his wife do that? That's easy. They weren't all with his wife. Zeus was a very friendly man. He liked to go out and make friends with people. And oftentimes his friendships caused babies to happen because of his friendliness. Hopefully, I can be as vague as possible and you can understand how friendly Zeus was. And so that'll be just part of what we're going to get into is Zeus and his many friendships.
What friendly things did he do?
Wellness will teach you about Zeus's friendliness. You should definitely bring that up and go, Mr. Brovicast said Zeus was friendly. Can you explain more? And then just sit back and watch the awkwardness happen. Hi.
Just say Zeus has W risen, everyone will understand.
Yeah, that works for me. Zeus was the original W Riz, all that one. He would just sort of show up and be like, hey, I'm Zeus. And they're like, yeah, you are. And then from there it got awkward.
Cereal.
Which brings us to do you guys know what jovial means if it's related to Zeus?
No, the god of sky and weather.
That's what he was the god of.
God of thunder.
Lightning.
Jovial
Friendly.
is happy and friendly.
Oh, wait, really?
Yeah. So, means to be happy or on top of the world. Not because of Zeus's friendships, but the idea was if you were king of the gods and the king daddy, and awkward as that is, it was thought that you were a very happy person. So if you saw someone walking around having a good time, you're like, oh my God, you're on top of the world. You're like Zeus. And they're like, I don't have that many friends. They're like, well, not that kind of like Zeus, but you seem happy. So they said you were Jove-like, which became jovial, which just meant a happy person. By the way, we're going to find out there's a lot of irony in Greek mythology because it is ironic that jovial comes from Zeus.
Because he's depressed.
Kind of. He's a very angry person. He spends most of his time being paranoid about being overthrown, and the easiest solution was to kill people. So
That makes sense.
he spends a lot of time either being friendly or killing people. Those were his two main hobbies. You know, issues. All right, so I bought you time to find out where cereal comes from. It comes from Kroger. Close.
Demeter.
Demeter.
What's Demeter's Roman name?
Cereal.
And Ceres, slight spelling difference.
Siri.
And what is Ceres the god of?
Agriculture.
Nicely done. Not the god of talking to your phone. That's Ceres. The S makes all the difference.
Demeter.
Ceres/Demeter was the god of agricultural and growing. So here, this is Demeter, who's throwing her gang sign for West Side. Because Demeter was in one of the original gangs, the West Side Greeks. Over here, again, behind Swanky, this would be Demeter, who is again throwing down in a gang sign over there at Hades. And then over here, behind Caleb, this would be Demeter in this one with her throne of wheat behind her. The girl really likes wheat and growing
Is
things.
it the god of the other places' measurement system?
That might not have made as much sense as you think, but sure. She was sort of like their version of Mother Nature. She made everything grow. If you wanted food and num-nums, then you would have to pray to her to make your food and num-nums grow.
Demeter.
Which brings us to cereal. What is the definition of cereal?
Grain.
Oreo. Has to be food from grains because, as Shaw points out, Oreos are a type of food.
I meant Cheerios.
And Oreos should... This explains a lot, that you're getting Oreos and Cheerios confused when your parents come down in the morning and you have a bowl of Oreos and you're like, I thought they were Cheerios and not my fault. And just pouring milk on. So, means food that comes from grain, not just food you put into a bowl and put milk on. Because that could explain a lot of things. I now understand why you don't want your dad sitting at your table at camp. So, here's our problem with cereal. Originally, cereal was food that came from grain. Nowadays, cereal is not food that comes from grain. Today's cereal is food that comes from sugar. Covered with sugar. And sometimes there's like a little sugar on the side to make it taste better. So we have these things called frosted mini wheats.
Those are very good.
They are delicious.
Ew.
But
so soft.
they're only delicious because they have the sugar on top
The
of them.
bad
Hence the frosted mini wheats. If you're not positive about it, realize these are fairly new. That used to be, before this, when I was a kid, it looked like this, where it was just called shredded wheat. And literally, it just came with a log. It looked like when you drive by farms and they have those giant rolls out in the field. That's what it looked like, and they would just plop that into your bowl, and then you would put milk on it and go, I wish this was an Oreo, but it wasn't. It tasted like literal farm shavings. So that's when they
Why
realized
would you do this?
to make it taste good, you have to put sugar on it. Hence, you would have this version of it, which has sugar on it, and kids would eat it. This version, not so much. When I was a kid, that was no bueno. It did not taste good at all.
Man, this
Jimmy Jam?
Okay, I'll say this. The only reason frosted mini wheats are even good is not really because of the sugar, it's because you have to eat them dry.
I do eat them dry too. I feel the same way. I'm not much of a milky person there. Yes.
You have to eat them dry.
Is that what?
It's disgusting.
I felt like it. Trust me. When I went to my grandma's house when I was a kid, and she said we have cereal, and I got excited because I grew up on honeycomb, and she busted this out as cereal. I was like, Grandma, that is not cereal. She goes, it says cereal on the box. I'm like, well, they lied to me. It was awful. Yeah.
Cut it yourself.
Literally, you would just get a biscuit in the box, and then you would break off a chunk of biscuit and put it in the bowl, and it felt like you were being pranked. Alright, Volcano, which you guys should know because we talked about this.
Hepatitis B.
So,
What have I done?
Where do you guys see that?
what is Hephaestus' Roman name?
Vulcan.
Nicely done. So, again, the thing that what is it you guys get in trouble for being on during class?
Drugs.
That explains a lot. Yes, you should not be doing drugs in class. Save that for home, Gussie. But I was thinking of phones, which phones start with a PH sound. This is the same thing. Your teacher doesn't say, get off your phone, unless you're on your drums. They say, get off your phone. So it's the same thing here. It's not Hephaestus, just like it's not a Pahony. It's a PH, which is an F. So again, Hephaestus. And sometimes it's actually spelled with an F. And so I have seen that before where there's just an F in the middle to help you for those kids who get off your Pahony. So,
Yeah.
you mean you're a heroin?
He didn't even have to search anything.
Apparently we have to start with the P.
Project.
This is Hephaestus here with the flamey hair. We're going to talk about this thing underneath his arm in just a second. Yawn. Ooh, home children, you can actually see him. He's, right
He's ripped.
there. Well, he is make-believe.
He's chiseled.
Oh, chiseled. Nice reference. Here is next to Swanky. This is him sitting down looking grumpy. And then over here, he's behind where whenever is. This is him looking really ugly. He also has a thing underneath his arm. It's just hard to see there. Hephaestus is correct. It's a crutch. He was the only crippled god. And he was the god that had a broken leg forever and ever, which is a story we're going to get into. He was also considered one of the only ugly gods. And it's connected together. It's a story that we're going to get to next week, that when he was born, he was so ugly that his parents threw him away, which is apparently a thing you do with ugly babies. When you're like, ah, and you just chuck it. That's what happened to him, and it broke his leg when he was young. So that's Hephaestus. This thing that he has in front of him, which is in every single picture. Those of you who play your Minecraft, so it's supposed to be an anvil, which is what you use for making weapons or your dog tags for your animals in Minecraft or something like that.
Yeah.
As I had a kid yell at me earlier. But that was his main job. Sorry, hiccup. For the gods was he made all the weapons. He did not make the lightning bolts or the trident, because that's a different story. But all the other ones that the gods used, he was the one that made weapons and stuff like that. What? They would lie? That sounds not like... Yeah, we're going to get into that too. And the reason why, what is a volcano? Hot. So,
Fire.
mountain of fire, which connects back to Hephaestus, because since he was ugly, the other gods didn't let him hang out. He didn't. It's like he was sort of like their version of Rudolph. He didn't get to play the other reindeer games. They kicked him out. So what thought was, whenever you had a mountain, he was the one that would go and be working inside the mountain, making weapons. And then as he would get really worked up and making big weapons, sometimes it would build up so much heat and steam,
Go boom.
it would cause the top of it to blow off the top. And then that was the reason why it was called a volcano, is because anytime you saw a mountain explode, it meant it was the home of Vulcan. So a volcano, literally, by definition, just means the home of Hephaestus, because that's where he was working and making things and stuff like that. So that's where he comes in. Mercurial!
Hermes.
Oh, wow, you're on top of that. Because what's his Roman name?
Mercury.
Nice. So Hermes, whose Roman name was Mercury, to show you the pictures again, he is the one that's over here in the orange and yellow, who looks like he's doing the Heisman Trophy pose, for those of you who know your football. Down here, he's the one that's running around with his little cape because he thinks he's Superman. Over here, he's right where Wyland's pointing, and it looks like he ran so fast his shirt fell off. And he was the god of speed, the god of messengers. He was also the one that would take people down to the underworld whenever they died because he was super fast.
Isn't he tiny? Boatman.
Isn't he
We're
fat?
gonna we'll get to the story.
He doesn't look great.
We'll
He's not
get to
the
that.
Italian
We'll get to
god.
that,
There you go.
buddy.
He's not the Italian god.
So,
Oh.
Mercurial is a word that means able to change quickly. Oftentimes referring to science experiments. It can also refer to sports. It can refer to someone's personality. If you know someone who goes from like happy to angry really quickly, or something like that, you can say they have a mercurial personality because it changes. If you've ever seen someone drop Mentos into Diet Coke, where it goes from Diet Coke to giant mess in half a second, that's a mercurial change because it changes quickly. If you've ever watched ice freeze, that's not mercurial. That takes a long time to have happen. If you watched the Super Bowl last night, Mahomes is mercurial. He is able to change direction quickly when they're running after him, which was impressive since the dude only had one leg like Hephaestus. So he sort of channeled all of those different parts. If you look in his picture, he is carrying a thing in every picture of him. It's a stick, over here, stick.
It looks like the
Oh.
doctor stick.
That's
stick.
So one, I found mercurial being used in an article. I was reading about IU, and they were talking about the fact that the sharpshooter for the team was mercurial. I thought that was kind of nifty. But the caduceus staff is the thing that he's carrying. It's a stick,
Medicine side.
2 wings, and it has the little things going back and forth. It's a story we're going to get to with Hermes, where he stole it, because he was also the god of thieves, but he used it to heal people, because his job was to grab your soul when it died, to take it down to the underworld so that the boatman could take it across.
We'll get to
But if it was not your time to die, instead of taking your soul down, he would use the stick to heal you and bring you back to life. And then you wouldn't have
Like
to
to
die.
imagine he smacks you with the stick.
Who would have thought smacking you with a stick would heal you? But that's what your parents were trying to do when you were a child when they hit you with a stick. They were trying to heal you.
Oh.
So, back during this time, if you were someone who was good at being a doctor and healing other people, you would carve this symbol onto your door. And so that way, nowadays, it is still used connected to the medical profession. Anytime that you see it, it means it's connected to healing, which goes all the way back to Hermes. So now you can impress your parents and be like, Greek mythology. There's also another version called the Staff of Asclepius, which is just a stick with one snake around it, which you may recognize also from medical things. It is also connected to Greek mythology, but not connected to him. There was a different guy who used it who was also a healer. The Greeks had 2 different snaky sticks that were all connected to healing. Snakes were not considered evil until Christianity. Back during the Greek times, they liked snakes. They were kind of cool and hissy, and you could throw them at your friends. It wasn't until the Christians came along, they were like, bad snake, hiss, hiss. So they thought snakes were kind of cool, and you would use the venom to heal and stuff like that. So that's our caduceus staff. Now, this one seems to be a little bit tougher for kids to figure out. It is not connected to Thanatos, which is connected to Thanos from Marvel, but there is a Greek god called Thanatos, who is the god of death, but that's not what fatal is connected to. But I can understand the guess. The Fates. Nice one. What does it say about the Fates? Clotho, Lachesis, Atropos. Well, it's on the little sheet that has all the little things on there. Also, good job not trying to make it sound Greek. Every year I have a kid who will try to pronounce it as the Fates, because they try to make it sound like it. And they're like, the Fates. And I'm like, no, like, I meant the Fatties. And I'm like, nope, not the Fatties either. But that was a good try. I'm like, it's just Fates. I'm like, oh, that's kind of boring. And I'm like, well, yeah. In Greek mythology, the Fates were the three sisters whose job it was to control how long humans lived. If you saw the Hercules cartoon, they were the three sisters who shared the little eyeball that went back and forth, and they tried to kill Hercules by cutting his string. The little eyeball thing, I've seen some stories refer to it, other stories refer to this thing from Shakespeare. Sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. But it was always these three sisters, Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos, who controlled how long people were supposed to live.
Wow, they're so cute.
Actually, I'll leave them back up there. So here's where I get to a little bit of a story.
Story time.
All three.
So, let's imagine young Steve is about to be born. The way that they believed it worked was that before you were born, the three fates would decide how long you were going to live prior to your birth. So, baby Steve is still in the womb and getting ready to pop out. So the three sisters get together and go, all right, here comes baby Steve. Let's decide how long he is going to be in the world. So the first sister, Clotho, her job was to create the magic string, which was the ball of life. And she was the only one who could touch it and control it. So she'd be like, all right, baby Steve. And they would grab a string and she would start pulling it out. And she would bring it over to the second sister, who had a measuring stick. But her stick, instead of like inches and feet, hers had minutes, seconds, hours, days, weeks, years, so on. And they would start measuring how long baby Steve is going to be with us. It could be 3 minutes, could be 13 years, could be 80 years. And then the third sister, Lachesis, who had the scissors, her job was to step up and cut the string. The moment the string is cut, that's baby Steve being born. So it would go cut, fizzle, wah, wah. Baby Steve is now in the world. His life is already predetermined how long it will be. They don't know what's going to happen during it. They think of it like the old cartoon bombs that have like a little fuse that was going down. And when that fuse was up, you died. So you would have no more fuse to live. Let's say they pull out the string and it snags and it only goes to like 3 minutes. And they're like, ah, well. And they go ahead and cut the string, fizzle, baby Steve is born. And that was how they explained baby death, is that apparently your string was not very long. But let's say they pull it out and it goes to 13 years and 5 days. And they cut the string there. And Steve's like, I've got to live until 13 years and 5 days. They don't choose how you die. It's just the moment he hits 13 years and 5 days and his string is up, he's going to die. It just depends on what he's doing. If, say, he's walking home from school, all of a sudden a bus gets a flat tire and goes, ah, and runs over him. That might be how he dies. Maybe he's in the middle of a basketball game and the string dies. All of a sudden some guy goes for a rebound and is like, whack! And Steve's like, ah! And then down he goes. So whatever it's going to be, Steve dies at that moment. But let's say Steve is paranoid and he's afraid his string is going to be up. So he goes into a big padded room full of pillows. And he was like, no bus is going to get me on 13 years and 5 days.
The roof collapses.
And he's sitting there. It could be the room collapses. Or maybe Steve just goes, and it just falls over dead. You were like, teen heart attack. So no matter what, you die at the end of it. But let's say Steve finds out that his goes until 80 years. And he's like, I'm not going to die until 80. And Steve right now is 13, and he decides that he is going to become a superhero and fight crime because he's not going to die. So Steve goes out to his first bad guy, and he's like, you can shoot me, I'm not going to die. Ha 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 ha. And they go, okay. Bang! And they shoot him in the head. Steve goes, poor choice, and then falls down. He does not die, but he'll be in a coma for the next 67 years until you hit age 80, and then all of a sudden at age 80, when your string is up, he goes, I'm awake, and then dies.
Wouldn't
And
Hermes heal him though?
that was how they would explain comas. Sometimes if Hermes didn't get to him, you would be in a coma for however long it was until your thing was eventually up. So they don't decide how you die, just the moment you die. And there's a horror movie series called Final Destination. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but it's based on this idea. There's a group of teenagers who are supposed to be on a plane, and the plane crashes, and then they're supposed to die but don't. So then, in other words, their string was supposed to be up. So then it's all about the fact that like the fates keep coming after them, trying to kill them. That's a really cool little horror movie.
It's like
Bryce?
Do people know how long the string is?
No, no one would know how long. There are stories about heroes trying to seek out the fates to find out, but being as that they were imaginary, it was hard to find. But yeah, that definitely slowed down the whole journey a little bit. So if Steve has a fatal accident, what does fatal mean?
Dead.
It means Steve is dead. And so it means the string cutting, which was in the cartoon, they tried to cut the string in order to kill him. And in the case that would not work because it means Steve was already born. So here is Steve, fatal, he has died. So now you know how the fates work. The fates.
Fates, people.
And then we get to Iris in our next one, but this is next week. Tomorrow we have speeches. Please be prepared so I can be nice to you. Hopefully. Home children. Good luck.
Get the index card at home.
What?
You get the index card at home.
You'll get it when you volunteer is when you get your index card. So, because there is a set specific index card you have to use, and you only get it when you volunteer. That's my way of rewarding the volunteers.